In the heart of northern Minnesota, a German shepherd named Rex stands alone guarding an abandoned car buried beneath the snow. Once a heroic police canine, Rex is now a shadow of his former self, discarded after a tragic incident that shattered his life. But there's more to this dog than meets the eye. His relentless barking and unshakable vigil over the vehicle signal something far more than just an abandoned relic. As Detective Jennifer Hayes, his former partner, arrives at the scene, she begins to uncover the chilling secrets hidden in the snow. What is Rex guarding? Watch now to discover the shocking truth that could change everything. The cold wind howled through the barren trees of northern Minnesota as snowflakes danced across the frozen landscape, blanketing the ground in a thick layer of white. The air bit sharply at anyone foolish enough to be outside. This was a place where winter never seemed to end, where nature's unforgiving touch could freeze the heart as easily as it froze the earth. It was in this brutal environment that Rex found himself standing vigil alone. Once he had been the pride of the Oak Ridge Police Department, a legendary German Shepherd canine known for his bravery and sharp instincts. His days were spent on missions that saved lives, from tracking down criminals to rescuing victims from disasters. But all that changed 3 years ago. A single fateful mistake had shattered his career and left him discarded. The loss of his handler, Richard Patterson, in a botched raid had forever altered Rex's path. The official story had painted him as a traitor, a dog who abandoned his partner in the moment of crisis. No one had been willing to listen to the truth. Now Rex lived alone, far from the bright lights of the police station. His once muscular frame had grown thin, his coat no longer the shiny, sleek fur it used to be. It was matted, dirty, the result of months spent surviving in the wilderness. Yet even in this miserable state, something in Rex remained steadfast. His loyalty never wavered. His purpose, though unclear, still burned within him. For the past 48 hours, Rex had stood in front of an old, rusted Crown Victoria parked in the middle of nowhere, its faded red paint barely visible under the snow that had begun to pile around it. His barking had been relentless, each sharp sound echoing across the snow-covered plains. It wasn't like Rex to bark this much. Something was wrong. And yet his deep, resonant barks didn't come from fear. They were a warning. There was something about that car. Rex wasn't sure what it was, but instinct told him to guard it, to never leave. And so he hadn't. As the hours dragged on, his throat grew hoarse, but he did not stop. His eyes, once filled with the pride of a well-trained police dog, were now weary and shadowed by pain. But they remained sharp, darting constantly between the vehicle and the cold, lifeless expanse around him. It was on the second day that Detective Jennifer Hayes came to the scene. She had been drawn there by the strangest of calls, a report about a dog barking incessantly by an abandoned car in the middle of nowhere. When she arrived, she had no idea what to expect, but when her eyes met Rex's, recognition struck her like a lightning bolt. Jennifer had trained Rex years ago, back when she was part of the K-9 unit. He was once her partner, loyal and true. They had been through many difficult cases together, and his presence had always been a source of strength. But that was before the incident. That was before she lost Samantha, her daughter, and before everything went wrong in her life. Her heart ached as she looked at Rex, the same dog who once stood proudly by her side, now broken and alone. She stepped closer, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Rex's barking ceased as he recognized her scent. His ears perked up and his once vigilant posture softened, but only for a moment. He was still guarding the car, still focused, still determined. Jennifer called out softly, "Rex." His eyes met hers, and for the briefest of moments it felt as though time had stood still. But then just as quickly Rex turned back to the car, his barking starting again, sharper this time. He wasn't finished. There was more to uncover. Something about this car wasn't right. Jennifer's instinct told her that she couldn't ignore Rex's warning. She reached for her radio, her voice steady, though a flicker of concern ran through her veins. "I need backup and a crime scene team at Lakeside Lot. There's something here, and I don't think it's just an abandoned vehicle." The wind howled through the barren landscape, biting sharply at Jennifer's skin as she approached Rex, still steadfast and resolute in his post. The old Crown Victoria stood abandoned in the snow, its rusted frame half buried, a relic of something long forgotten. Yet Rex, with all his strength gone, still watched over it with unwavering dedication, his eyes flicking from the car to the surrounding empty wilderness. His barking had stopped briefly when Jennifer arrived, but the silence was brief. The tension in the air was palpable as Rex resumed his watch, his growls softer, but still persistent. Something was hidden there, something Rex had found and guarded like it was his mission. Jennifer approached cautiously, keeping her distance. There was something unnerving about the car. She had seen abandoned vehicles before, but none of them had provoked such a reaction from Rex. His focus was absolute, his posture rigid. His instincts were telling him something, and Jennifer knew better than to ignore them. She had trained Rex herself, and though time had passed, she could still sense the intelligence in his eyes. He wasn't just barking, he was alerting her, guiding her. "Easy boy," Jennifer murmured softly, her voice barely audible above the howling wind. She stepped closer, her boots crunching against the snow. Rex's head turned slightly, his eyes locking onto hers for a moment before returning to the car. He pawed at the ground anxiously, his body tense. Jennifer could feel the urgency in his actions. "Rex, what are you trying to tell me?" Jennifer whispered, her heart racing. Her mind began to race as well, running through all the possibilities. Could there be something dangerous, a hidden body, or was it something else, something far worse? Her breath came in sharp bursts, the cold air stinging her lungs, but she couldn't leave. Not when Rex was this focused. She knew he wasn't just being protective. There was more. There had to be more. Jennifer reached for her radio, her hand slightly trembling. "I need backup and a crime scene team at Lakeside Lot. There's something here. I don't think it's just an abandoned vehicle." She spoke with authority despite the tension creeping up her spine. She knew Rex wasn't barking for no reason. There was something hidden here, and she was determined to find it. Within minutes, backup arrived. Jennifer motioned for the team to move carefully. They approached the car cautiously, as Rex continued to stand guard, his growls growing slightly louder with each step they took toward the vehicle. As the team surrounded the car, Jennifer knelt beside Rex, her hand resting on his head for reassurance. His eyes flickered to her again, as if telling her to be careful. The crime scene team moved methodically. Jennifer's eyes never left the car, watching as the technicians began to assess the situation. One of the officers opened the trunk with a crowbar, the metal creaking in protest as the rusted lock gave way. The smell that hit them was unmistakable, but it wasn't the stench of decay. No, it was the sharp metallic scent of something old but not forgotten. Papers, documents, and something far darker. Jennifer's heart skipped a beat as the officers began to pull out stacks of papers and personal items, old photographs, a few pieces of clothing, and various small items that seemed oddly familiar, like they had been left in a hurry. But it wasn't the items that caught her attention, it was the notebook that one of the officers discovered hidden beneath the papers. Rex's attention shifted to the officers now, but he remained quiet, his head tilted in the way only a trained canine could. Jennifer's gaze moved from the items in the trunk to the notebook, her heart beginning to pound. Something told her this was no random discovery. She reached out, her hand steady despite the storm of emotions rising in her chest. As she flipped open the notebook, she saw the first few pages filled with mundane notes, case files, names, dates. But as she flipped further, her stomach dropped. The entries shifted from routine notes to something far more personal. There in the center of the page was a date, October 15th, and beside it a description that made Jennifer's blood run cold. Samantha, a red-haired girl, local, missing. The rest of the entry was less clear, filled with codes, but it was unmistakable. This was about her daughter, the girl who had disappeared without a trace 7 years ago. Jennifer's hand trembled as she scanned the pages. Her daughter's name had been written there among the notes of missing people. And it was here in this forgotten place that she finally found the first clue. Hidden in plain sight. As she continued to read, the clues grew more disturbing, more detailed. Names, times, and places connected to her daughter's disappearance began to emerge. The eerie connection between Rex's presence and the events unfolding seemed more than just coincidence. This wasn't just about Samantha anymore, it was about a larger, darker conspiracy. And with Rex by her side, Jennifer was about to uncover the most shocking truth of all. Jennifer's hands were steady despite the whirlwind of emotions that surged inside her. She could feel the weight of the notebook in her palms, the secrets it contained heavier than anything she could have imagined. As she flipped through the pages, she could see that the first few were filled with mundane case files, names, dates, locations, and routine notes. It seemed harmless enough at first, but as her eyes moved further down the pages, her breath caught. The notes grew darker, more personal, and her stomach twisted with each word she read. She turned to a page dated October 15th. The entry wasn't as formal as the others, but it struck her like a hammer. The words, Samantha, a red-haired girl local, missing, were written there alongside cryptic details in a series of coded phrases. It didn't take long for Jennifer to recognize the devastating truth. Her daughter's name was written there right next to the words missing, Samantha, the little girl she had lost 7 years ago. Jennifer's heart raced, and for a moment the world around her seemed to slow. This was real. The search, the endless nights of wondering, and the gnawing feeling in her gut that had never gone away, it had all led her here. To this notebook, to this single page where the first piece of the puzzle had been revealed. She forced herself to continue reading even though her hands trembled. As she moved through the pages, the details grew more alarming. The missing person's entries were not random. Each one had a pattern, a connection to something far bigger than Jennifer could have imagined. Dates, names, locations, names she recognized from old case files, names that linked directly to disappearances that had never been solved. But there was more. Each page led her further down a path that was becoming clearer, more disturbing with every word. This wasn't just about Samantha anymore. The network of missing children, the dates, and the clues all pointed to a larger, darker conspiracy. It was no longer a coincidence that Rex had found this car. Rex, once the pride of the K9 unit, had brought Jennifer here as if guided by an instinct far beyond his training. The dog had always been loyal, always alert. But now, standing guard over the car, it seemed as if Rex had been protecting something or someone important. And Jennifer realized that the secrets in the notebook were not just about uncovering the truth of her daughter's disappearance. They were about something much darker, something that had been buried for years. Rex has always remained vigilant by her side, his eyes darting between Jennifer and the car as though urging her to continue. There was more to find, more to uncover. Jennifer knew this was only the beginning. The deeper they dug, the more questions would arise and the closer they would come to the truth. The notebook had changed everything. Now Jennifer and Rex had a shared purpose. The mission was no longer about solving a cold case, it was about stopping a network of criminal activity that had been hidden in plain sight. And that network had been operating right under Jennifer's nose for years. Jennifer stood in the biting cold, her breath rising in visible clouds as the wind whipped through the barren landscape. Rex's constant presence beside her was a comfort, but the weight of the notebook in her hands was enough to push her thoughts into darker corners. She couldn't shake the images of the past, of Samantha, her daughter, and the haunting question that had consumed her for 7 long years. What happened to her? It had been a crisp autumn afternoon when Samantha vanished just after school. Jennifer had been working a routine case, her phone out of reach as she focused on the paperwork in front of her. She hadn't heard the knock on the door, and by the time she realized something was wrong, it was too late. Her daughter was gone. No traces, no witnesses, just the terrible emptiness left in the wake of her disappearance. The investigation had come to a halt within weeks, and no amount of searching or questioning brought her any closer to the truth. The helplessness of that first week still haunted Jennifer. She remembered the looks of pity from her colleagues, the empty promises from the department that they would find Samantha. But the weeks turned into months and eventually years. The weight of being a mother desperate for answers was suffocating. Her life, once filled with purpose and a clear sense of justice, was now consumed by the ache of not knowing. She paused as the memories rushed back, the sound of Samantha's laughter still fresh in her mind, the little girl who once filled their home with joy. But now that laughter was only a ghost, and Jennifer couldn't escape the suffocating feeling of being left behind. Her daughter had been taken, and for all her efforts she still had no answers. The sense of guilt and failure followed her every day. She had failed as a mother, and it felt like the entire world was judging her for it. The guilt was only compounded by the betrayal of Patterson, a betrayal that still weighed heavily on Jennifer's heart. Patterson had been her closest friend in the force, a man she trusted like a brother. They had been partners working together on countless cases, and even though their careers had diverged, she had always thought of him as family. But when Rex was involved in the incident that led to his disgrace, Jennifer had stood by him. Yet Patterson had turned on her. The official story of Rex's abandonment during the raid on the drug house had painted Rex as the villain, a traitor who had left his handler to die. But Jennifer had never believed that. She knew Rex better than anyone. He was loyal to the bone. There had to be more to the story, something that Patterson wasn't saying. When Patterson had been placed on leave and ultimately removed from the department, Jennifer had been forced to watch him slip away, taking with him the answers she needed. The investigation was closed, but Jennifer knew there was more to the story. She couldn't shake the feeling that Patterson's involvement in Rex's disgrace had been part of something bigger, something darker. She had spent years fighting against that doubt, questioning the truth, wondering if Patterson had turned on Rex and by extension on her. Could he have been involved in something shady, something criminal? Every fiber of Jennifer's being screamed that there was more to the story, but she couldn't prove it. Not then, not now. The betrayal cut deeper than just the loss of a colleague. It was the betrayal of someone she had trusted with her life. It had left a scar on her soul, one she would never heal from. The discovery of the notebook had shaken Jennifer to her core, but it also reignited the fire inside her. She had spent the better part of 7 years searching for answers, and now, with the notebook in her hands, she could feel herself getting closer to the truth about Samantha and the dark forces that had played a role in her disappearance. Jennifer knew that the trail was far from over. The notebook was just the beginning. Her mind raced as she turned the pages again, trying to connect the dots. Patterson, the man she had once trusted more than anyone, was the key. The betrayal that had once felt like a sharp sting now felt like a heavy burden she had to carry. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became. Patterson's involvement in Rex's disgrace wasn't just a matter of personal failure. It was something far more sinister, but she needed proof, and she needed it now. Jennifer's focus shifted back to Patterson. He had disappeared after being removed from the force, and his trail had gone cold. But Rex, as always, seemed to know more than anyone else. His behavior had become increasingly odd ever since they had found the car and the notebook. Rex wasn't just guarding the abandoned car, he was obsessively fixated on the documents inside, as though he had discovered something buried within that Jennifer had missed. Rex's actions had begun to confuse her. He would pace back and forth, his nose to the ground, then stop suddenly and stare at the trunk of the car as though urging Jennifer to look closer. There was something in the air, something Rex had sensed long before she had even realized it. It wasn't just the car, it was everything. Rex seemed to be leading her somewhere, as if he understood the path better than she did. Jennifer's instincts told her she needed to follow the dog's lead, to let him guide her as he once had when they worked together. She decided to dive deeper into Patterson's past, something she should have done years ago. She needed to know everything: where he had gone after leaving the force, what connections he had made, and what secrets he had kept hidden. Patterson wasn't just a disgraced officer. He was a man who had slipped into the shadows of something much bigger. Rex continued to act strangely, darting between different locations around the car, sniffing at patches of snow as if there was something buried beneath it. At times he would stop and stare, his eyes narrowing as though trying to convey a message Jennifer couldn't yet understand. He knew something, and Jennifer was determined to find out what it was. That night, after hours of reviewing Patterson's old case files, Jennifer made a chilling discovery. Patterson had been involved in the trafficking of missing persons. His connections with certain powerful individuals whose names appeared in the notebook, were impossible to ignore. Patterson's departure from the force had been timed perfectly with the rise of human trafficking rings operating under the radar. Jennifer's heart sank. She had never suspected Patterson could be part of something so vile. But the evidence was undeniable. Thomas Wilson, a fellow officer and Patterson's close confidant, was also involved. It was clear now that Wilson had been one of the key players behind the disappearances of several local children, including Samantha. The betrayal was far deeper than Jennifer had ever imagined. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Patterson had faked his death to escape the consequences of his actions, and Wilson had continued the work they had started, moving children across state lines using their power to conceal the truth. The darkness surrounding this case was much larger than Jennifer had thought, and the web of deception was far from being untangled. Jennifer had a sinking feeling that she was being drawn into something much bigger than just her daughter's disappearance. The faces she had once trusted, Patterson, Wilson, were now enemies. The question was, how much had they already covered up, and how much was she willing to risk to expose them? Jennifer's hands trembled as she leaned back in her chair, staring at the papers spread out in front of her. The puzzle pieces were finally falling into place, but the truth was more horrifying than she could have ever imagined. Patterson, the man she had trusted with her life, the man she had once called a colleague, had faked his own death. He had walked away from everything, the family, the badge, and the investigation, only to dive into the shadowy world of human trafficking. The man she had once thought of as a friend had become a criminal mastermind. The pain of the betrayal was sharp, but the realization that Patterson had orchestrated this entire nightmare left Jennifer feeling hollow. He had left behind a false trail, a carefully crafted narrative that had shielded him from justice. No one had ever suspected that he had been part of a larger, more insidious operation until now. Thomas Wilson, the officer who had been Patterson's closest confidant, was deeply involved in the trafficking ring. Jennifer had known Wilson for years. He had been a reliable cop, someone she thought she could trust. But now it was clear that Wilson had been pulling the strings behind the scenes, facilitating the disappearances of children across the state. Samantha had not been his only victim. There were others, countless others, who had disappeared without a trace, and Wilson had been responsible for orchestrating their abduction and movement. Jennifer's heart pounded in her chest as she read through the notes. Wilson was more than just a participant. He was a key player in this underground network. His involvement went far beyond the borders of Oak Ridge. He had connections that spanned states, and he was willing to use every ounce of his power and influence to conceal the truth. The more Jennifer uncovered, the more she realized how far the corruption reached. It wasn't just about Patterson and Wilson. It was about a system designed to protect them, to shield them from the consequences of their actions. The danger was closing in. Jennifer could feel it in the pit of her stomach. She had uncovered a network of criminals, a vast conspiracy, and she had barely scratched the surface. She had always known that there were darker forces at work in Oak Ridge, but now it seemed like she had stumbled into a hornet's nest. She wasn't just investigating the disappearance of her daughter anymore. She was exposing a system of human trafficking, and the people behind it would stop at nothing to protect their interests. Wilson's betrayal stung deeply. He had been the one Jennifer had worked alongside, trusted and respected. To learn that he had been involved in such a vile operation made her feel sick to her core. The realization that the man she had once relied on for support had been behind some of the darkest moments in her life made her question everything she had ever believed about loyalty and trust. But the more Jennifer learned, the clearer it became Wilson was still active, still running his criminal operation. The evidence she had uncovered, coupled with the patterns emerging from the notebook, pointed to one undeniable truth. Wilson was trying to cover his tracks, and he would do whatever it took to silence anyone who threatened to expose him. Jennifer was no longer just hunting down leads. She was in a race against time. Her mind raced as she considered her options. Wilson was dangerous, and he was close. Every step forward she took brought her closer to him, but it also made her a target. She had to be careful. She had to stay one step ahead of him or she might lose everything. The walls seemed to be closing in on Jennifer as her investigation into Wilson deepened the pressure from her superiors only grew. She could feel the eyes of the department on her, the whispers behind closed doors, the ever-present concern that her obsession with finding her daughter had clouded her judgment. They had never fully understood her drive, the years of pain, the unanswered questions, the endless search for Samantha. To them, it was just another case. To Jennifer, it was her life. Jennifer, her captain, had said in the last meeting, his voice laced with concern, "We've already put a lot of resources into this. We can't afford to get too far off track. I need you to consider the bigger picture here. Not every case ends with a neat little bow." But Jennifer couldn't stop. She couldn't let go of the string she had just started to pull. Wilson's name was linked to too many disappearances, too many victims. This wasn't just about her daughter anymore. This was bigger. She could feel the urgency mounting with every step she took. The longer she waited, the more dangerous it became, not just for her, but for everyone involved. Despite the mounting pressure from her superiors, Jennifer pushed on, refusing to back down. There was no turning back now. She had to see this through, even if it meant taking on the system she had once trusted. Meanwhile, Rex's behavior had grown even more erratic. It was as if the dog could sense the urgency in the air. Jennifer had always known Rex to be highly intelligent, but now his instincts were almost too sharp. He wasn't just following her lead, he was actively guiding her, pushing her forward, urging her to look deeper, move faster. For the past few days, Rex had been leading Jennifer to places she hadn't expected. It was as if the dog knew the path better than she did. Each morning after she reviewed the notes from the notebook, Rex would nudge her towards a new lead, whether it was a location to check or a person to question. He was relentless, his pace faster than usual, as though he sensed they were running out of time. One day, after a frustrating dead end with a lead, Jennifer found herself standing outside a small, run-down diner on the edge of town. Rex was already circling the building, his nose twitching, his body rigid with anticipation. Jennifer hadn't expected to find anything here, but the dog's behavior had never been wrong before. "All right, Rex," she muttered under her breath, her hand instinctively reaching for her gun. "What are you trying to tell me?" Rex stopped, his tail wagging slightly as he looked at her, eyes wide with a level of intelligence that Jennifer could almost feel. He turned toward the back of the diner, as if giving her a silent command to follow. Jennifer hesitated for only a moment before following Rex's lead. As they rounded the back, she found a small, hidden door, the kind that would have been easily overlooked by anyone else. Rex pawed at the door, his barking low and steady, as if announcing that someone was inside. The hairs on the back of Jennifer's neck stood on end. She stepped forward, heart racing, and pushed the door open slowly. The faint smell of old leather and dust filled her nostrils as she stepped inside, her hand on the grip of her weapon. The room was empty save for a few crates stacked along the walls. But Rex was sniffing around a small, inconspicuous door in the corner. She moved closer, trying not to disturb anything. But Rex's focus never wavered. He kept nudging the door with his nose, his growls soft but persistent. Jennifer knelt down beside him, heart pounding in her chest, and carefully turned the doorknob. What lay behind it would change everything. The door creaked open, and Jennifer's heart seemed to stop. Behind it, in the dimly lit room, lay a small, dingy basement space. A low, buzzing light flickered overhead, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch across the concrete floor. Rex's nose twitched as he pushed past Jennifer, his growls becoming more intense. He was close. The air in the room was stale, and a faint scent of sweat and something metallic filled Jennifer's senses. Jennifer stepped inside, her eyes quickly scanning the space. The walls were bare except for a few old posters and scattered debris. There were no windows, just a single heavy door at the far end, the source of Rex's relentless attention. But what made her stomach drop was the unmistakable sound, a faint rustling like someone moving cautiously inside. Her pulse quickened as she moved toward the door, Rex right by her side. The door creaked as Jennifer slowly turned the knob, her breath shallow, her mind racing. What could it be? What was Rex sensing? Was it Samantha? The door opened to reveal a small room, and there, lying on the floor, was a girl. She was thin, her face gaunt, and her hair was tangled and unkempt. But what struck Jennifer most was the vivid, unmistakable red hair. Samantha. Samantha. Jennifer gasped, stepping forward in disbelief. Her heart surged with hope, but it quickly mixed with a deep sense of dread. Her daughter was alive, but she was in a far worse condition than Jennifer had ever imagined. Samantha's eyes fluttered open as she heard her mother's voice. For a moment she seemed confused, disoriented, but as she saw Jennifer, recognition sparked in her eyes. Samantha's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her body was too weak, too exhausted to react fully. Tears filled Jennifer's eyes as she knelt down beside her daughter. Samantha, sweetheart, you're safe now. I'm here. Samantha tried to sit up, but her body trembled. She looked at Jennifer, her gaze hollow, filled with years of pain. "Mom, I thought you'd never come," she whispered, her voice raw and hoarse. Jennifer held her daughter tightly, a mix of relief and heartbreak flooding her chest. Samantha was alive, but barely. Jennifer had found her, but she wasn't safe yet. The room felt suffocating as Jennifer pulled Samantha into her arms, the reality of what had happened finally hitting her. Samantha was here, but this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Jennifer's mind raced. She could hear Rex's low growl growing louder as he paced nervously beside them, his body tense. He was alert. Something was wrong. Then Jennifer heard it. A faint sound from the other side of the room, growing louder with each passing second. Footsteps. Jennifer's eyes widened. They were not alone. Someone was coming. The footsteps grew faster, echoing through the narrow hallway. It was then that Jennifer realized Wilson and his crew had been moving the children to a different location. They had been planning to take Samantha and the others away to hide them in another secure facility. Jennifer had just barely caught up, and now the threat was escalating. Her mind snapped into action. "We need to move now," she whispered urgently to Samantha. But Samantha was too weak, her body trembling uncontrollably. Jennifer turned to Rex, who was already positioned, his eyes locked on the door. He knew what was coming. He was ready. The door handle jiggled and Jennifer's pulse quickened. They didn't have much time. She had to get Samantha out of here before it was too late. Jennifer's heart pounded as she prepared for the inevitable confrontation. She had come this far to save her daughter, but the fight was far from over. The door creaked open with a slow, deliberate motion, and Jennifer's hand instinctively gripped the handle of her weapon. Her heart was racing, but her mind was sharp, calculating every possible outcome. Rex stood beside her, his body tense, every muscle coiled in anticipation. His ears were pinned back, eyes fixed on the door. The footsteps had stopped. Whoever was on the other side knew they were not alone anymore. Jennifer could feel the weight of the moment. She had found her daughter, but the battle was far from over. Wilson and his crew were still a threat, and she had to act fast. The air was thick with tension as she took a step forward, her hand outstretched toward the door. The handle rattled once more, and then the door burst open, revealing Wilson standing there, his face shadowed by the dim light. He looked almost surprised to see Jennifer, as if he hadn't expected her to make it this far. His eyes flicked quickly to Rex, who growled low and steady, a warning that sent a chill down Jennifer's spine. "Jennifer?" Wilson's voice was calm, almost too calm, as if nothing were wrong. "I didn't expect you to come this far, but you should have stayed out of this." He stepped forward, blocking the doorway. Jennifer's hand hovered over her weapon, but Rex was already moving. The dog lunged at Wilson, his powerful frame knocking the man back a few steps. Jennifer seized the moment, pushing past Wilson, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of further danger. She had to get Samantha out, now. Wilson regained his footing quickly, his expression hardening into something dangerous. "You're making a mistake," He spat, his voice filled with venom. "You don't know what you're dealing with." Before Jennifer could react, two other men appeared in the doorway, their guns raised. Wilson wasn't alone. The confrontation was escalating quickly, and Jennifer knew she couldn't keep them at bay forever. They were outnumbered and the odds were stacked against them. "Get back, Jennifer," Wilson commanded, his voice laced with authority. He was trying to control the situation, but Jennifer wouldn't back down. Not now. Not when she was so close to uncovering everything. "Not this time," Jennifer replied, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. She stood firm, blocking Wilson's path. Rex, sensing his handler's resolve, barked loudly, his eyes locked onto the men in the doorway. The tension in the room was unbearable. Wilson's eyes flicked to his men, signaling them to advance. Without warning, the gunshots rang out, echoing through the small room. Jennifer ducked the sound of bullets ricocheting off the walls, filling her ears. Rex moved first, leaping forward to protect her. His speed and agility were remarkable, but he couldn't avoid every attack. One of the men managed to land a blow, a sharp shot grazing Rex's side. The dog yelped, but he didn't falter. He continued to fight, moving between Jennifer and the attackers with unwavering loyalty. Jennifer fired her own shots, taking down one of the men with a quick, practiced motion. But the fight wasn't over. In the chaos, Wilson and his remaining man moved quickly toward the back of the room, and Jennifer could see their escape route forming. She had to stop them. This wasn't just about her daughter anymore. It was about justice. She couldn't let them get away. Jennifer and Rex pushed forward, determined not to lose ground. But as the fight continued, she saw it. Rex was slowing down. His movements were more sluggish now, and there was a deep, bloodied wound on his side. His breathing was labored, but he stayed by her side, defending her at every turn. "Rex, no," Jennifer whispered, her heart sinking as she realized the extent of the injury. He was giving everything, but at what cost? She couldn't afford to lose him now. Not when they were so close to the truth. Jennifer's heart hammered in her chest as she watched Rex falter. The sound of gunfire, the heat of battle, everything around her was a blur of chaos. But the dog, her loyal partner, was everything in that moment. Every instinct told her to keep fighting, to push forward, to catch Wilson before he escaped. But as the seconds passed, Jennifer could feel her resolve weakening. Rex had always been there for her, brave, strong, and unwavering. But now, as the blood seeped from his side, staining the snow and floor beneath him, Jennifer realized that his loyalty was not without a cost. He had taken the brunt of the attacks, protecting her even as his body weakened. His strength, once unshakable, was beginning to falter. "Rex!" she cried, dropping to her knees beside him, her hands trembling as she reached for him. The dog whimpered softly, his eyes locking onto hers, full of pain, but still with that familiar spark of determination. He was fighting, but she could see it in his movements. He was running out of time. The sight of his blood, her dog, her partner wounded, sent a wave of desperation through Jennifer. She had to make a choice. She had to stop the bleeding and keep him alive. "Stay with me, boy," Jennifer whispered, her voice barely audible as she pulled Rex closer to her, cradling his head in her lap. "I need you to stay with me, please." She glanced up at the remaining attacker. He was inching closer, and Wilson too was preparing to make his escape. But Jennifer couldn't move. She couldn't leave Rex. He had been with her through it all. She wouldn't leave him now. Rex's eyes fluttered as he struggled to breathe. His body shuddered with each intake of air, and Jennifer could feel his pulse weakening under her hand. She knew she had to act quickly. "Help!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the haze of the fight. "Someone get over here!" Jennifer reached into her pocket, pulling out the emergency kit she always carried. The blood was flowing too fast. She couldn't afford to lose him, not when they were so close. But as she tried to patch him up, she could see that the wound was deeper than she had first thought. The bullet had torn through muscle and tissue, and Rex was weakening with every passing moment. "Don't you dare give up, Rex," she murmured, her eyes brimming with tears, but her voice firm with determination. She was not going to lose him. Rex let out a soft whine, but his tail gave a small thump against the ground. It wasn't much, but it was enough for Jennifer to know he was still with her. She kept working, applying pressure to the wound, desperately trying to stop the bleeding. Her mind raced. She knew they couldn't stay here much longer. Wilson and his men were still out there. She had to continue the investigation. She had to find out what they had been doing, how deep the conspiracy went, and she had to stop them before more children were taken. But Jennifer couldn't ignore the gnawing fear in her chest. How could she do this without Rex by her side? How could she continue the fight when her partner, the one who had always been there, was fighting for his life? "Please hold on," Jennifer whispered through clenched teeth, pressing harder on the wound. "We're not done. We still have work to do." She took a deep breath, steeling herself. She would not give up. Rex had given everything to protect her, and she would do the same for him, no matter what. The sterile scent of the vet's office was thick in the air, but Jennifer couldn't focus on anything but Rex. He was lying motionless on the table, hooked up to an IV, his body covered in bandages. The dog she had trained, the dog she had trusted with her life, was fighting for his own now. His breathing was steady, but there was still so much uncertainty in the air. Jennifer's hands rested on the edge of the table as she watched Rex's chest rise and fall. His usual alertness was gone, replaced by the quiet stillness of exhaustion. The wound on his side had been treated, but it had been a close call. Rex had given everything, pushing himself beyond his limits to protect her. Now he needed her. The vet, Dr. Harris, had been kind but firm when explaining how critical the situation had been. "He's a fighter, that's for sure," the vet had said as she examined the stitches, "but it'll take some time for him to fully recover. His body's been through a lot." Jennifer nodded, but she couldn't shake the weight in her chest. The thought of losing Rex was unbearable. He had been her companion, her partner through thick and thin. Losing him now would mean losing the only connection she had left to the past, to everything she had fought for. She couldn't let that happen. Not when they were so close to the truth. As Rex lay there resting, Jennifer began to reflect on everything that had led her here. The investigation, the fight, and the revelation about Patterson and Wilson. It all seemed to be spiraling into something darker and more dangerous than she had anticipated. But she couldn't back down. She owed it to the children who had been taken, and to Samantha to push forward. While Rex rested, Jennifer continued to sift through the evidence she had gathered. The notebook had opened doors she never expected, and with each new entry, the layers of the conspiracy grew more intricate. Patterson's connections were not just local. His actions had ripples that extended far beyond Oak Ridge. There were names, addresses, and hidden locations pointing to a network of human trafficking that spanned several states. The horror was unfathomable, but the closer she got to the truth, the clearer it became that Patterson, Wilson, and others had been hiding in plain sight right under everyone's noses. The more Jennifer uncovered, the more questions arose. She had always believed in the system and justice and the idea that the truth would prevail. But now that belief was being tested. The higher the stakes became, the more corrupt the system seemed. She had to expose the network. And she had to do it before Wilson or anyone else had a chance to cover their tracks completely. Jennifer sat at her desk, the dim light above her casting shadows across the stack of files and notes in front of her. The weight of what she had uncovered was pressing down on her, each page revealing a deeper layer of corruption and horror. The network of human trafficking was vast, and the longer Jennifer sat there, the more she felt the walls closing in. Time was running out. Wilson and his crew were still out there, still moving children from one hidden location to another. The decision was clear. She couldn't wait any longer. The rescue mission had to happen now. Before the children were moved again, before the evidence was destroyed, and before Wilson could slip further into the shadows. She couldn't risk losing any more time. "Rex," she whispered, her voice filled with both determination and an unspoken fear. "We're doing this. For them. For Samantha." The dog, still resting from the injuries he had sustained, looked up at her. His eyes, though tired, still held that fierce loyalty Jennifer had come to rely on. She could see the spark in them. He was ready. He had always been her partner, and now, more than ever, she needed him. Jennifer stood and grabbed her coat. She made the call to her team. This would be no ordinary mission. This was a full-scale rescue. She could feel the gravity of what was to come. She needed everyone she could get: a tactical team backup from the local police and a few trusted officers from her department. Every moment would count. There was no room for error. Within hours, Jennifer and her team were gathered, the plan set. They would move quickly, infiltrating the location using the information from the notebook. They had tracked the traffickers' movements to an abandoned house on the outskirts of the city, and they were confident that Wilson had been using it as one of his drop-off points. As Jennifer walked toward the vehicle, Rex was already at her side. His steps were slower than usual, but his presence was unwavering. He seemed to sense the importance of this mission, the weight it carried. Jennifer reached down her hand, brushing against his head. "Stay with me, Rex," she said softly. "We're going to get them out of there." The team moved out, and Rex led the way. Despite his injuries, the dog's senses were still sharp. He moved confidently, his nose working the air as if he could smell the hidden secrets of the house long before they arrived. Jennifer could feel the tension building as they neared the location. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. Rex stopped in front of the abandoned house, his ears flicking back, his body stiffening. He was on alert. Jennifer signaled for the team to hold back as she approached cautiously. Rex's focus was complete. He had found something. The house was empty of people, but the scent of danger hung heavy in the air. "Let's move in," Jennifer ordered. The tactical team spread out, ready to breach the house. Rex was still leading, moving ahead with quiet determination. They entered the house carefully, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The air inside was thick, musty from years of neglect. As they moved through the rooms, Rex's movements were precise, his body scanning the area as if he knew exactly where to go. Jennifer followed, her heart pounding in her chest. Rex paused at a corner of the house, his ears twitching, his body low to the ground. He was fixated on something. Jennifer took a step forward, her hand instinctively reaching for her weapon. She was ready. Rex darted forward, and suddenly Jennifer knew what he had sensed. The children were here. The moment of realization was like a punch to the gut. This was it. They were so close. But there was no time to waste. The team moved in, and the operation began. The silence inside the abandoned house was deafening, broken only by the soft shuffle of feet and the occasional creak of floorboards. Jennifer could feel the tension in the air as her team moved swiftly through the darkened rooms, weapons drawn, eyes scanning every corner. The musty smell of decay clung to the walls, and Jennifer's heart raced as Rex led them forward with unyielding determination. The house had been abandoned for years, but something felt very much alive in this moment. The atmosphere was thick with danger. Rex had sensed it long before they entered. His movements were calculated, his sharp eyes darting from room to room as though he was hunting for a scent only he could detect. Every step was deliberate, as if he knew exactly where they were headed. "Stay close," Jennifer whispered to her team, her voice barely audible in the stillness. The only sounds now were the rapid breaths of her and the tactical officers, their hearts beating in sync with the urgency of the mission. Rex's tail twitched once more as they moved deeper into the house. They had to act fast. There was no time to waste. Without warning, Rex stopped at a door. His body was tense, ears back, eyes wide and unblinking. He was on high alert. Jennifer nodded to one of the officers who took the lead, using a battering ram to break down the door. The loud crash echoed through the house, and Jennifer's pulse spiked. This was it. They were about to face what they had been hunting for. The door swung open, revealing a dimly lit room. It was small, and the air inside was colder than the rest of the house, as if it had been sealed off for a long time. There in the corner of the room were 3 young children, huddled together, terrified, their eyes wide with fear. Their faces were gaunt, their clothes torn and dirty. They looked as though they had been trapped here for far too long. "Stay down," Jennifer barked, rushing into the room to shield the children from view. But the moment she stepped inside, chaos erupted. A figure stepped out from the shadows, gun raised. "Wilson." His face twisted into a cold sneer as he saw Jennifer. "You shouldn't have come here, Jennifer," he growled, his voice dark with malice. He had been expecting them, and he wasn't going down without a fight. Before Jennifer could react, two other men emerged from the darkness, their guns drawn. A standoff had begun. The children were safe for now, but the danger was far from over. Jennifer took cover behind an old wooden cabinet, her weapon aimed at Wilson. "It's over, Wilson." "You're done," she said, her voice steady, though her heart pounded in her chest. This was the moment she had waited for. The truth was within reach. Wilson laughed bitterly. "You think you can just walk in here and stop me? You have no idea what you're dealing with." His eyes flicked toward his men. "We're not the only ones who know how to play this game, Jennifer. You're in over your head." With a sharp signal, the men began firing, the sound of gunshots ringing through the house. Rex lunged forward, his powerful frame knocking one of the men off his feet. The dog's agility and speed were unmatched as he took down another, his jaws locking around the man's wrist and forcing him to drop the weapon. Jennifer fired, taking down the last of the attackers with precision. Her breath was steady, but inside everything was a storm. She had to keep her focus. This wasn't just about the takedown. It was about saving these children, stopping Wilson, and uncovering the full scope of this criminal network. Wilson, now pinned to the ground by Rex, struggled to break free. But Jennifer stepped forward, her gun trained on him. "Where's Patterson?" she demanded, her voice cold as steel. Wilson's smirk faltered. He knew the game was up, but he wasn't ready to give up the fight. "You'll never get the full story. Patterson's gone, and there's nothing you can do to stop us." Jennifer moved in closer, her eyes narrowing. "You've already lost," she said, her voice unwavering. "You're going to tell me everything." Rex stood beside her, watching Wilson carefully. The dog's body was covered in blood from his earlier wounds, but his loyalty never wavered. Jennifer knew she couldn't do this without him, not now. Jennifer stood still, her gun trained on Wilson, watching the defeated man carefully as Rex continued to hold him down. The dog's eyes never left the criminal, his jaw still firmly set in place. Despite the injuries Rex had sustained, his focus and loyalty were unshakable, and it filled Jennifer with a resolve she hadn't felt in years. Wilson was now their captive, but Jennifer's mind was already racing ahead. The real work was just beginning. She had always suspected that there was something deeper, something far more sinister behind the disappearances. She had uncovered the tip of the iceberg, but now it was clear this was not just a local issue. It wasn't simply about missing children in her town. What she had stumbled upon was a global network of human trafficking. The connections stretched far beyond Oak Ridge, and the people involved were not just common criminals. No, they were powerful, embedded in international circles with ties to those in positions of authority, making it nearly impossible to root them out. The realization hit Jennifer hard. Her instincts had been right all along. Wilson's smug defiance didn't just represent a local operation. It was part of something much larger, a dark network reaching into the very core of governments, businesses, and law enforcement agencies. This wasn't just about exposing Wilson and Patterson anymore. This was about tearing down a system of corruption that had existed in the shadows for far too long. The challenge ahead seemed insurmountable, but Jennifer knew she couldn't stop now, not with Samantha and countless others still trapped in its grip. Jennifer moved slowly, her eyes never leaving Wilson, and pulled out the notebook. She began flipping through the pages, looking for more clues that could help her understand how far the reach of this operation went. The names and codes on the pages started to make sense, each entry adding weight to the growing picture of what they were facing. There was more here than just the disappearances. There were plans, dates, and coded references to illegal transactions that spanned across continents. Wilson had been the gatekeeper, but now Jennifer had the key to unlock everything. Suddenly, Rex's behavior changed. He started to move, nudging Jennifer's leg insistently. She looked down at the dog, confused for a moment, but then she saw it. Rex's eyes were focused on the back of the room. His body was low to the ground, and he was moving toward a small, seemingly insignificant door. It was as if he knew where the answers lay, and he was guiding her there. Jennifer followed, her heart pounding in her chest as she realized Rex was leading her to something important. She moved cautiously, pushing open the door that Rex had been fixated on. Inside the room was small, filled with dusty crates and old furniture. But at the far end, behind a stack of boxes, Jennifer saw a large metal filing cabinet. Rex had already circled it, his nose working furiously. She approached it cautiously, her hand on the handle of her gun, but the door to the cabinet opened without resistance. Inside were files. Files that looked old, but meticulously organized. The names in these files were familiar from the notebook, and Jennifer's stomach dropped as she realized what she had found. These weren't just random documents. These were records of human trafficking operations, dates, locations, individuals involved, and most chilling of all, photographs of the missing children. The files detailed names, ages, and locations where children had been sent. It was horrifying. There were photos of Samantha, her daughter, marked with a red stamp that read "Complete Transfer." The other children's faces, many of them unfamiliar to Jennifer, were lined up with the same disturbing label. Rex sat by her side, his head tilted as though he understood the magnitude of what they had uncovered. Jennifer's hands shook as she pulled out the photographs and the papers. She had found it, the final piece of the puzzle. These files weren't just proof of a trafficking operation. They were the key to taking down the entire criminal network. She clenched her fists, her jaw tightening. They were so close to finding out where Samantha had been taken, but Jennifer knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of the final phase of the mission. Jennifer stared at the files in front of her, her mind racing as the pieces began to fall into place. Samantha was alive. It was a fact that seemed impossible just hours before, but now standing there in the dimly lit room, it was undeniable. The photographs, the meticulous records, they all pointed to the same chilling reality. Samantha, the little girl who had vanished 7 years ago, was still out there hidden in some secret location. The red stamp on her photograph, "Complete Transfer," hung in front of Jennifer like a weight around her neck. Her daughter had been moved, transferred to an unknown destination, part of a system that trafficked innocent children for profit. And Samantha was a part of that system, unknowingly trapped in its web. Jennifer's hands shook as she sifted through the remaining papers. Every page told the story of a child taken, a life ruined, and a system built on pain and suffering. These were not just numbers and names. These were real children, real families torn apart. Some of the children had been placed into homes, some sold into dark and dangerous corners of the world. The evidence was clear. The operation spanned borders with connections in multiple countries involving powerful individuals at every level. But as horrifying as the details were, they were not enough. Jennifer knew that every step they took closer to the truth meant more danger. The faces behind these operations were still at large. As much as she had uncovered, there was still a lot left to find. Wilson Patterson, and now the names on these papers, these were just the start. Jennifer had only scratched the surface of a much larger conspiracy. With Rex by her side, Jennifer felt a sense of urgency like never before. The files weren't just the blueprint of the trafficking network. They were the map to her daughter, and she had to follow that map. There was no time to waste. Turning to Rex, Jennifer gave a quick nod. The dog had been her guiding light throughout this nightmare, and now more than ever she needed him. Rex's eyes were focused, his stance resolute. Even after everything he had been through, the dog was ready to continue the fight. She knew that saving Samantha was just the beginning. The next step was finding her, getting her out, and taking down those responsible. Jennifer closed the files with a grim expression. She had found the first lead. Now it was time to follow it. The air was thick with tension as Jennifer and Rex approached the final steps of the rescue operation. The plan was in motion, and everything hinged on this one moment. Samantha was alive. The information from the files had led them here to this hidden place. Jennifer could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on her as they neared the location marked on the map. The house loomed ahead, a decaying structure in the middle of nowhere. It was eerily quiet, the silence broken only by the sound of Rex's steady breathing and the soft crunch of snow beneath their boots. Jennifer could feel her pulse racing, her every instinct telling her that the time for waiting was over. It was time to act. Rex, ever the loyal companion, was at her side, his body tense, eyes scanning their surroundings. His instincts had been right so far, and Jennifer knew she could trust him to lead the way. He was the one who had found the clues, who had guided her through this twisted maze of corruption and deceit. As they entered the house, Jennifer's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just a rescue. It was the moment she had been fighting for, the moment that would finally bring her daughter home. Samantha was somewhere inside, hidden away from the world for far too long. The room they found her in was dimly lit, small and sparse, with nothing but a cot in the corner and a few discarded blankets. At first, Jennifer didn't see her, but then through the shadows a figure stirred. A small, fragile figure with messy auburn hair. Samantha. Mom. Samantha's voice was soft, hoarse, barely audible. Her eyes were wide and filled with confusion, but there was recognition in them. Recognition and fear. Jennifer took a step forward, her voice shaking with emotion. Samantha, sweetheart, it's me. It's Mom. Tears welled up in Jennifer's eyes as she knelt beside her daughter. Samantha's hands trembled as she reached out, her body weak from the months, maybe years, of captivity. The bond between mother and child was instantaneous despite the time apart. Samantha's fragile form fell into Jennifer's arms, and for a moment the world outside ceased to exist. You're safe now, baby, Jennifer whispered, brushing the hair from Samantha's forehead, tears streaming down her face. I've got you. I won't let anyone hurt you again. For a few moments, everything else faded away. The fight, the chase, the years of uncertainty, none of it mattered in that instant. What mattered was that they were together again. Samantha was home. But as the reality of the moment settled, Jennifer felt a chill crawl up her spine. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. Rex, still standing vigilant by her side, gave a soft growl, alerting Jennifer that they were not alone. It was as if the danger hadn't left them even in this moment of reunion. Thank you, boy, Jennifer whispered, her hand resting gently on Rex's head. He had never left her side, not once, not even when his own life had been at risk. He had kept going just as she had. Samantha pulled back slightly, looking up at Jennifer with a faint smile, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. They said you were never coming, that you gave up, she whispered. Jennifer shook her head, tears still flowing. I never gave up, Samantha. Never. But the relief in her chest was brief. Wilson and Patterson's operation was far from over, and Jennifer knew the true fight was just beginning. They had to bring down the rest of the network, make sure the people responsible for this were held accountable, and make sure no more children were hurt. Come on, Jennifer said softly, helping Samantha to her feet. We've still got work to do. With Samantha safe and the immediate threat of the traffickers subdued, Jennifer felt a brief but undeniable sense of relief. But she knew that the true battle was still ahead. Wilson and Patterson had orchestrated an extensive network, and while the immediate danger to Samantha had passed, the deeper and more dangerous aspects of the criminal operation were still out there. There were others involved, powerful individuals who would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. Jennifer wasn't about to let that happen. Her daughter was home, but the price of justice hadn't been paid yet. As she led Samantha to safety, her mind shifted to the mission at hand. They needed to track down the rest of Wilson's network, bring the criminals to justice, and dismantle the trafficking ring that spanned far beyond what she had originally thought. Rex, let's finish this, Jennifer muttered, her voice filled with both determination and exhaustion. The dog, still bearing the scars of his battle, trotted beside her, his eyes alert and sharp. Rex had been through so much. Yet he was the one who had kept her grounded, the one who had led her to Samantha, and the one who would guide her to the heart of the conspiracy. The team had already started tracking the remaining suspects. Wilson's connections ran deep, and the department had gathered all the information they could find. The next step was to pinpoint the final location, the base of operations where the remaining criminals were hiding. But the hunt wasn't as simple as following a lead. It was more than that. The criminal network had taken extreme measures to conceal their tracks, and they were well-funded, powerful, and ruthless. Jennifer, along with Rex, was about to step into the lion's den, and she knew that the risk was high. But there was no going back now. She had to finish what she started. Rex, despite his injuries, led them through the forested area outside of Oak Ridge. He had always been the one to navigate the most treacherous situations, his senses sharper than any human's. This time, as they approached a small cabin deep in the woods, Rex stopped, his posture tense, ears raised. The hairs on the back of Jennifer's neck stood up. Something was wrong. "We're close," Jennifer whispered, her voice barely audible. Her fingers tightened around the grip of her weapon, her breath coming out in sharp bursts. The cabin, isolated and hidden, was a stark contrast to the city they had just come from. It felt off-dangerous. The closer they got, the more Jennifer felt the weight of the mission pressing on her. Rex's low growl snapped her out of her thoughts. They had arrived. The final confrontation was close. Jennifer's tactical team had set up positions around the perimeter of the cabin, but the group of traffickers still inside had no idea they were about to be caught. Jennifer checked her equipment one last time, and then she gave the signal. The team moved in, closing in on the cabin from all sides. Rex at the front led the charge. His keen nose guided them to the back door, and with a quick push, the team breached the entrance. The cabin was silent, too quiet for comfort. As Jennifer and her team moved through the shadows, the tension was palpable. Each step forward brought them closer to the heart of the operation, but it also meant stepping deeper into danger. Wilson and his crew were not going to let this raid go down without a fight. Rex, ever vigilant, led the way with his nose to the ground, his every step purposeful. His low growl echoed in the stillness as he moved, the dog's instincts guiding Jennifer through the building. The cabin, though small, held more secrets than Jennifer had anticipated. She had hoped for a straightforward raid, but as Rex nudged open the door to a hidden room, she knew this was no ordinary crime scene. The room was small, tucked behind a series of crates and a makeshift wall. As Jennifer stepped inside, her breath caught in her throat. The walls were lined with files, photographs, and documents, everything she needed to complete the puzzle of Wilson's network. But it wasn't just the files that caught her attention. A large map was pinned to the wall detailing locations from across the world, each marked with a red X. These were international trafficking routes, and they led to multiple countries. Jennifer's pulse quickened. She had uncovered something far bigger than she had ever imagined. This wasn't just about a few missing children or a local operation. This was a global trafficking syndicate, one that had been moving children and commodities across borders for years, hidden under layers of corruption and secrecy. Rex, still on high alert, sniffed around the map, his eyes darting to the documents as if he understood the magnitude of the discovery. Jennifer couldn't tear her eyes away from the map. The connections were clear. Wilson and Patterson had been operating on a much larger scale, with ties to politicians, wealthy businessmen, and even law enforcement officials in several countries. The implications of this discovery sent a chill down her spine. "We have to stop this," Jennifer whispered under her breath, determined. But as she turned to leave the room, a sound broke the tension, the sharp crack of a door opening. Jennifer's eyes snapped to the sound. Within seconds, the cabin erupted into chaos. Gunshots rang out from multiple directions, and her team dove for cover. Wilson's men had anticipated the raid. They were ready. Jennifer pushed herself against the wall, her breath ragged as the sound of gunfire filled the room. The traffickers weren't going down without a fight. She could hear their shouts, their frantic movements as they scrambled to protect their operation. Rex was at her side in an instant, his teeth bared as he charged toward the sound of the attackers. With a sharp bark, Rex lunged at the first man who emerged from the shadows. The dog's attack was swift and brutal, knocking the man to the floor. The rest of the team followed suit, returning fire and pushing forward to subdue the remaining criminals. Jennifer aimed carefully, her shots precise as she neutralized the threat in front of her, but it was clear that the fight wasn't over yet. The traffickers were not only armed, they were desperate. Jennifer's mind raced. She had to find the children. She had to get them out of there before it was too late. Rex was by her side, never faltering, his instincts sharp as ever. Despite the chaos, he was keeping her safe, blocking attacks when necessary, and leading the charge as they cleared the cabin room by room. The noise of gunfire and shouts reverberated throughout the cabin, each moment feeling like an eternity. Jennifer's heart raced as she darted from cover to cover, moving with calculated precision. Her team, though outnumbered, had the advantage of surprise, and the criminals, though desperate, were beginning to falter under the pressure. But Jennifer knew this was far from over. The traffickers backed into a corner, fought with everything they had, and their desperation made them unpredictable. Rex moved like lightning, darting between attackers, his powerful jaws snapping with ferocity as he brought down one thug after another. The dog's movements were swift, and each strike sent a clear message. Rex was not just fighting for himself. He was fighting for the children, for Samantha, for justice. His loyalty was unwavering, his actions instinctual, as if he knew what was at stake. Jennifer could hear his growl over the chaos, a constant reminder that they were not alone and that together they would push through. Jennifer's hands were steady, her eyes sharp as she returned fire, taking down the remaining men one by one. She moved quickly, each shot fired with precision, each step taken with purpose. There was no time for hesitation. The children's lives hung in the balance, and Jennifer knew she couldn't afford to lose another moment. But as the last of the traffickers fell, Jennifer noticed something that made her heart stop. Rex was slowing down. His movements were less fluid now, his once sharp focus dimming with each passing second. A deep cut ran along his side, and though he kept fighting, Jennifer could see the toll the battle was taking on him. He was hurt. Badly. Rex, Jennifer whispered, her voice filled with both fear and admiration. She moved toward him, her hand reaching out to touch his bloodied side. "You've done enough, boy. We're almost there." But Rex was still on his feet, his head held high, determined to see it through. He wouldn't stop, not while the fight for justice was still going. As Jennifer checked her surroundings, she realized they were close. The last criminal had been subdued, but there was one final task to complete the mastermind behind it all. Wilson had been the key to this operation, but he was not the one pulling the strings. There was someone more powerful, more dangerous waiting in the wings, and Jennifer was determined to find him. Jennifer made her way through the cabin with Rex at her side, his tail still wagging weakly but determined. They approached a locked room at the far end of the building, one that had been sealed off until now. Jennifer's instincts told her this was where the answers lay. With a sharp crack, she kicked open the door, and there in the dim light stood Daniel Marshall, the county's former medical examiner, a man who had been at the heart of the operation. He was the one who had been falsifying records, covering up evidence, and ensuring that the network's criminal activities went unnoticed by the authorities. The man responsible for so much pain and suffering was finally standing before her. Jennifer didn't hesitate. "You're done, Marshall," she said coldly, her gun aimed at him. "You're the one behind all of this. It ends now." Marshall's face twisted with rage, but there was a flicker of fear in his eyes. He had no more allies, no more escape routes. Jennifer had him cornered, and the weight of his crimes was finally catching up to him. The cabin, now eerily silent, seemed to hold its breath as Jennifer stood face to face with Daniel Marshall, the man who had orchestrated so much pain. His eyes flickered nervously between the gun in her hand and the reality of the situation. There was nowhere for him to run, no more lies to hide behind. The walls of his deceit had crumbled, and now it was time for the truth to come to light. Marshall's bravado melted into a grimace. He knew the end had come. "You think this changes anything?" he sneered, but his voice lacked conviction. "You're too late. The network's already too big. Too many powerful people involved." Jennifer's jaw tightened. "It ends today, Marshall. No more children. No more lives destroyed. You're going to rot in prison for the rest of your life." She stepped forward, her voice unwavering, and watched as the man's defiance evaporated, replaced by the cold reality of defeat. Behind her, the sound of footsteps echoed through the cabin as her team moved in to secure the scene. Rex, despite the injuries that had taken so much of his strength, stood tall beside her. His presence, though weakened, was still the embodiment of loyalty and determination. The dog had fought through his own pain to ensure justice was served, and Jennifer felt the deep bond between them as they faced down the final chapter of this long nightmare. As Marshall was taken into custody, Jennifer couldn't help but glance at the files and the evidence that had led them here. It was all over now, but the work of uncovering the full extent of the trafficking network had just begun. The crimes Marshall had been a part of had affected so many lives, but now those lives could begin to heal. Samantha, freed from her years of captivity, was finally going to be able to find peace. Jennifer turned to her daughter, her heart swelling with emotion. Samantha, though physically frail and emotionally scarred, was standing beside her, her hand gently resting on Rex's back. She had always been the beacon of hope in Jennifer's heart, even when it felt like hope was lost. And now, as they stood together in the aftermath of the storm, Jennifer knew that the true fight had been not just for justice, but for healing, for both of them. Samantha, Jennifer said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry it took me this long to find you, but I never gave up on you. I promised you I'd come back, and I did." Tears welled in Samantha's eyes, and she looked up at her mother, a faint but genuine smile breaking through the veil of exhaustion. "I knew you'd come for me, Mom. I never stopped believing." Jennifer's heart ached as she pulled Samantha into her arms, the two of them embracing in a moment of reunion that felt both surreal and deeply real. The years of pain, the uncertainty, the loss, they had all led to this moment. And in this moment, they were finally whole again. Rex, ever the steadfast protector, lay down beside them, his head resting on his paws, watching with a quiet satisfaction. His work was done. Justice had been served, and the family he had helped reunite was together once again. This journey of justice and redemption highlights the incredible bond between humans and animals, especially the German Shepherd, a breed known for its unmatched loyalty, intelligence, and courage. Rex, the steadfast companion, was not just a dog. He was a symbol of unwavering dedication, a protector who never gave up no matter the odds. His loyalty went beyond his training. It was a profound sense of duty, of love for his handler and those he vowed to protect. The story also reminds us of the immense power of unconditional love, the kind that drives us to fight for what's right no matter the sacrifice. Jennifer's love for her daughter Samantha kept her going through the darkest times, and the love she shared with Rex fueled her determination to seek justice even when the path seemed impossible. In the face of betrayal and loss, love became their guiding light, showing us that it is love that heals, motivates, and gives us the strength to keep moving forward. This narrative also underscores the positive values that are so important in today's world: loyalty, sacrifice, and justice. These are qualities we can all aspire to, not only in our relationships with animals, but also with one another. Rex's journey teaches us the power of standing by our loved ones, of never giving up even when the situation seems hopeless. In the end, the story isn't just about justice or victory, it's about the enduring power of kindness and the life-changing impact of unwavering support. Whether it's the loyalty of a dog or the love of a mother, these bonds remind us of what truly matters: protecting the innocent, standing for what's right, and most importantly, showing love and care to those who need it most.